Alright everybody, today we are going to be tying a pattern that has been pretty popular lately, just with a little bit different twist. This is a similar pattern to a Scandinavian fly called Brenda's worm. We were inspired to tie a little bit different rendition of it on a jig shank platform, and we're going to get after it. So we're starting with an SA274 size 6 from Ahrex hooks. And this fly is one material all the way through. So we're going to start with some Simi seal and end with some Simi seal. So to start, we'll start with UV Pacific Kingfisher, and that will be the tail section of this jig fly. This would be a great pattern to use a dubbing loop on, or a pre-made brush using Simi seal, but we're just gonna tie it in and bail it back the whole way through. Let's still make sure we get even distribution on each section of this articulated fly. We don't want this to stick out too long past the hook. This is going to be a pretty long fly as is, so we don't want it to go too much further back. I'm going to add a little bit more here to finish off this section, and then add our first articulation. Flip finish. Little resin. And the tail section of this fly is done. So we're going to be using our Spawn Super Shank Selection, and the nice thing about this is it'll add a ton of versatility to the size of the fly that you want to tie. So we've played around with this pattern a bit, and we are going to start with a 10mm shank. We're going to add that to the tail section here. Get it on there. There we go. And place it back in the vise. So you're tying this first articulation point on, you've got to be mindful of this hook. It is sharp, and it can and will get you if you're not multitasking. The next articulation point, we'll throw a rubber band back there, and it will help us. Alright, so like I said, this is going to be a Simi seal fly all the way through. Next blend is UV Pesca Hot Pink. But what we're going to do with this is we're going to make it a little bit shorter. So we're going to line these fibers up, take our scissors, cut it down the middle, and then re-blend them together in our fingers. We're not looking for a lot of movement in the fibers on this fly. The movement's going to come from the platform that it's tied on versus the materials it's tied with. being mindful that you're getting an even distribution. You can see on the bottom here it's a little sparse, so we're just going to sneak a little bit in. Totally okay to do that. Not going to change the dynamic of this fly. Alright, first section's done. Take it off the vise. Bit of resin. Cure it. And then we're going to go back to our Super Shank Selection and pull out an 11mm shank. So for this we're going to go 9 or 10, 11, 12, 15, and then a jig shank. So our 11 right there, and not quite necessary for the rubber band, so I think we're going to go without it. Push that down. Still got some of that semi-seal left that we just cut, and we will have to cut some more. And the old clump and dump method, we're just getting it on the shank. But we do want to keep in mind that we want to maintain consistency of the profile throughout this fly. We'll ensure that throughout the fly, just making sure that you have enough material down to keep a consistent profile. It's not going to be a tapered fly, it's more of a straight through profile like a worm would be. Back that up. Whip finish, and on to the next section. $12mm shanks next. You can brush this out throughout the process, each articulation if you'd like. So if you're going to do that, lock it into the vise. Brush it out. Staying with our UV Pesca Hot Pink. I'm going to continue to build out this worm's And if you did use a dubbing loop or a pre-made brush, it would undoubtedly be a little bit cleaner. But this method is exponentially faster, and I found it to be just as productive. Especially when a perfect taper isn't what we're going for. Alright, now we're going to jump to a 15mm shank. This is going to be a pretty good sized fly when it's all said and done, as you can see. You could easily just stop right there, add your jig shank, but we're going to make this just a little bit longer. Want a really big worm. At any point you can stop. You can. That's the nice thing about the shank selection, is you can cater what you're tying to any specific variation. You could use this pattern for a bunch of different species. I know that over in Scandinavia they've been using it for sea-run brown trout, but depending on the color selection and size, it could be used for trout, warm water, and saltwater species across the globe. Now we're going to take our spawn 90 degree jig shank, 20mm, and we're going to take a slotted super tungsten bead, fluorescent hot salmon pink, and we're going to slip that on like so, around the curvature of the shank and up to the neck. At that point, we are going to add the body of this worm style fly, and we are going to take our lead-free wire 0.25, and like I've said before, this is to secure the bead rather than add weight. So you don't need a bunch of wraps. We're going to push that up, secure that bead, winch that down, brush this out again, make sure that it's looking the way that we want it to. At any point you see some fibers that you don't want, you can just trim down the profile of this thing. Like so. And now on to the final leg of this fly. Back to the UV Pesca Hot Pink Semi Seal to finish it off. And this is a big variation of this worm. So this is a pretty long fly. But like I said earlier, any size, any length, you can tie this in. And any color pattern. So this color pattern we are playing around with for Steelhead, but a great one would be our Spawn Semi Seal Polycheat, which is designed to replicate a worm on a pattern like this. We're nearly done here. Pull this in tight to the bead, bail it back, couple wraps, good to go. Cinch that down. When you cinch that down, it's pulling those fibers into the grooves of the lead-free wire wrap, so it looks like it's coming straight out of the bead. Alright, so we're getting that there. We're going to brush this fly out. Make sure it has the profile that we want it. You can make it a little more sparse if you want to go in there and trim it a little bit, but pretty happy with this. So to finish this fly off, we're going to go down to the bottom where the slot is visible and add some resin into there. Just help seal that off. To go. So that's your variation of a Brenda worm. If I can get that hold still. Bear with us as we begin to do audio in these videos. It's a learning curve for us, but don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great day.